Welcome back to the Renaissance Space podcast, where we have the opportunity to listen and better understand life in education. As part of our Trust Talks, I am delighted to welcome Director of Teaching and Learning at TKAT, Kay Tinsley. She clearly has all things reading and English very much in her heart, including poetry, which is mentioned on more than one occasion. So welcome, Kay. I'm absolutely delighted that you've agreed to come on this podcast. I'm really interested in what you've got to tell us because I know you've got a very varied role within this very large MAT, TKAT. So would you like to introduce yourself and give us a little bit of a history and what you do? It would be really interesting. Thank you.
Oh, it's lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Yes, I work for a very large MAT. I'm a MAT leader, so I am the Director of Teaching and Learning, but I also have a role leading in reading. And that's wonderful because I've been an English teacher for quite a scarily long time. So I worked it out the other day. I think it's almost 30 years. So that's my primary passion, I suppose, in education.
And one looks at those years and thinks, 30 years? Where did they all go and what happened? So secondary backgrounds and 46 schools. And obviously you're very motivated by what you do. I can hear that in your voice. How does it all work at TKAT?
Well, I'm predominantly, I work in secondary because we have 14 secondary schools, but obviously I work across the trust as the Director of Teaching and Learning. And I suppose what I really love about it is we are a family of schools, and we have our hashtag TKAT1 family. And it really is. It's a very supportive group of individuals. But yeah, I would say it is like a family. And having been a secondary head, it's a very lonely business. And I would say that our secondary heads don't feel as isolated and lonely as I did. And I'm really certain that they don't, because we are part of this larger organisation. And the other thing that really works for me about TKAT is my values are completely aligned with the values of the leaders in TKAT. They're all primarily educators. You know, my CEO, absolutely passionate about children and their outcomes and their life chances. So whenever I'm talking about reading or things that are important to improve children's life chances, I get listened to because that's everybody's focus.
Fantastic. I think what you say about being lonely also often works for a classroom teacher as well, even though they're with a class full of people all day. It can still feel like a very lonely position. So as a head teacher trying to get through a day with all of the demands on their time, to have somebody coming in and being a bit of glue really in a nice way to help satisfy that need. Well, that's really lovely to hear. And so you were a secondary head. Were you sitting there minding your own business and someone came along and said, oh, okay, I've got just the job for you?
Well, no, I mean, it didn't really happen like that because actually what happened was I was involved in, having been an English teacher for a long time, I was kind of involved more widely in the town that I worked in around literacy. And then I had done a master's in education with my two now supervisors who were both doing research into reading in my school.
Wow.
They were doing it in 20 schools, but my school was one of them. And actually, that's more of what happened. I realised that I wanted to impact more widely across the system. So that's why I like this role, because I can have more impact on children's reading kind of outcomes and their helping them catch up in terms of their reading in our schools now, and contribute to that kind of debate and discussion that we are having in a way that we weren't really having about 10 years ago. And that's really what makes me happy. When I really thought about what made me happy in my job, that was it. So that's how I kind of came into TKAT.
That's fascinating, especially the comment about the reading, because I think even in the since COVID, actually, that whole fluency and vocabulary acquisition and developing children's understanding and comprehension, it's a sort of juxtaposition almost to reading for pleasure. I mean, ideally they go together, but people were very quick to say, children need to be reading for pleasure. They do, but we need some structure and we need people to be teaching that, don't we? And we need people to be unpicking and unpacking that. And it sounds like that's exactly what you want to do. You want to bring those books alive for children and give them an opportunity for their future.
Yeah, absolutely. And they need really focused, explicit instruction in how to learn to read. And they need to focus on comprehension as well as focusing on fluency and, phonics. All of those things need to happen right from early years, right through up until Key Stage 5. And for me, having been ahead and been involved in trying to include children in education and seeing how often it was their reading ages that were actually impacting on their ability to access the curriculum. That's very much why I decided to kind of take a bit of a almost like sideways move in terms of my career, so that I could focus on, helping more children improve their life chances, because it is a fact that our prisons are full of children who have been in foster homes and have special education needs, but also children who can't read, who have low literacy levels. And that is essentially why I'm so motivated, because this is about children's life chances. If you can't read, then you are going to be significantly poorer in terms of your life chances in so many different ways. And we also know that children who read regularly have better mental health. They because they have somewhere to escape to. I mean, of course, we know what lovely Marcus Rashford has said about his experience of coming to books late through a breakfast club. I mean, the schools that welcome children in with a hot chocolate and a book, they're doing so much more for children than just encouraging them to read. It's the safety and the emotional kind of warmth that a book can bring to your life, which is also very important. And mental health is so on the agenda right now, isn't it?
It really is. We're also articulating the benefit of a MAT where you have got primaries and secondaries. There's somebody who's got an overview, a sort of through view to understand that transition and make sure that there's opportunities in place to catch those children. And not that others aren't doing that, but it's much harder in a primary to have any control over their future, and equally hard for a secondary to have any control over the primary. And are you geographically sort of well spread, or are you all over the country? How does that work in terms of coverage?
We're quite disparate. So our schools run. I'm in Chelmsford and Essex on Monday. I was in Gosport, which is just a little bit along the road from Portsmouth yesterday. I'm in Portsmouth tomorrow. We have schools in Bromley as well, and a number of schools kind of around the Crawley area. So we are quite disparate geographically, and obviously technology has brought us together. And Renaissance and using a variety of different packages from Renaissance, and specifically AR, has enabled us to kind of come together in a way that we couldn't before, and kind of share expertise and data. So we are quite disparate though. Yes,
but having having that commonality helps, doesn't it? Because it gives you something solid that you can lean against, even if there are a few anomalies. You've got some sort of hope and some sort of hub that allows people to function around it. So I was going to say, ask you what really brings joy to your day, but I think you've articulated that really well with your passion and your obvious, real depth of understanding around the reading needs of children. I don't know if there's anything else, maybe based on the last couple of days that, you saw and you thought, yes, that's happening at last. It's really successful.
Do you know what I absolutely love? Yesterday I was at a school and a child came up to me and just randomly and asked if I would like to read their poem that they had written.
Oh,
And that really fills me up. We last year we were both, weren't we, at your event in London around the What Kids Are Reading. And that was, it was fabulous because we made a number of connections on that day, and one of the connections I made was with the Literacy Trust, and there is a lot of research around the ways that schools can most encourage poor children to write, and they really love writing poetry above everything else, and that's certainly my lived experience, and it's one of the reasons that I'm pursuing a PhD at the minute, because I'm focused on poetry teaching, which I find fascinating, because I do find it's one of those things that really unlocks things for certain children who may be put off by the kind of more the formality of prose, and writing stories and other types of creative writing. So that totally fills me up. And the
oh,
other thing that really fills me up is seeing the work that kind of comes out of projects like the project we did recently with Jeffrey Boakye, which is incredible. And
yeah,
I shared some of the videos and the work that students had done with him, and he was really blown away by their kind of cross-curricular response to his novel Musical Truth, which was one of the texts that was celebrated at the event last year. So those things make my day.
Yes, and how lovely when things come together. And I did actually do a podcast with Jeffrey Boakye, and it was so inspirational. I mean, I think I was bubbling for about an hour afterwards, thinking, "Wow, what a privilege to speak to someone who's got so much to offer, not just to schools, but
Yeah.
just to the world generally."
Yes, incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Incredible
Yeah.
energy. Incredible energy. I know during we mentioned COVID a couple of times, and things like flipped classrooms were brandished about as, oh, maybe this could happen in the future. And I was thinking, no, absolutely not. 100%. Yes, we've done it, and actually technology's been amazing and it's allowed us to do it. I'm assuming that you would feel exactly the same, Kay, that, the idea of you being in one room and the children being in another, or your colleagues being in one room and children being in another, would be anathema to
Yes.
you.
I mean, this is the interesting thing. Somebody said to me the other day, "Oh, well, we won't need teachers soon because we've got AI."
Oh,
And I was just thinking, oh, I can't really. I think most parents who might be listening to this who had small children or children of school age during COVID would be horrified at the idea that their children might be taught in their bedrooms by AI, because it's
mm,
obviously problematic. Um, I I think that there's so much that was lost for children during COVID. I mean, being in schools, I mean, I'm a huge fan of this educational philosopher called Gert Biester, and he talks about, the importance of, what makes a good education. He's written so extensively about that. And this idea that, socialization is part of what children need to do in schools. I mean, that kind of, couldn't happen if you were just being taught by a computer, could it? Um,
absolutely not.
and I'm very interested by some of the things that Keir Starmer's been saying recently, and they're quite fleshed out and quite interesting around, the importance of oracy in the curriculum, and potentially, if they got into power, what Labour might kind of bring into place around speaking and listening and oracy in the curriculum, because I think that's another thing that has kind of got lost in terms of literacy and in terms of pedagogy. Children aren't talking to each other enough in the classroom, and there is a lot of receiving of facts and information, and a lot of checking that they've received it. But I think there's so much that to be gained from, dialogic teaching, from children, being able to develop in terms of their learning by talking to each other, and being able to speak and articulate yourself is so important, isn't it?
Oh,
To present your
100%.
ideas, and to create and communicate, that's hugely important to me, and I'd be very excited to see what's happening in the next couple of years. Anybody who's heard about Peter Hyman and School 21 will be equally, I think, kind of watching what's going to happen. And I know Jeffrey was actually involved at School 21. He was head of English, I think, at School 21.
Yes.
So
Yes.
he was very instrumental in developing their kind of oracy curriculum, which is now, kind of going, getting a bit of head of steam nationally, I understand. So yeah, I think that's going to be very interesting.
And I think it plays right into the whole speaking, listening, reading, writing. They're all intrinsic, and the sort of passive adoption or passive filling up of a pail by children not engaging, not being able to respond to a question, not being able to have the confidence to contribute. All of that, I think, has been hit by COVID, and people could blame COVID. It's not about that. It's about ensuring that we get it right to fill that shortfall and make sure that they're equipped for the future.
Yeah, there's nothing more joyful than talking about a
No,
book with your partner, is there, in
no.
class, and learning how to, that mental modeling of, your thought processes when you're reading a book. I mean, if you want to teach children how to read, you have to model the questioning, the predicting, the clarifying, all of those things that go on with great comprehenders. Teachers need to model that, don't they? And
They
then
do.
about text, and then children need to discuss it together, ask each other questions, probe for clarification. It's what helps children reposition themselves as stronger readers, isn't it?
Completely. I watched a video of my 2.5-year-old granddaughter reading Three Little Pigs, and she said, and then a man came along with some bricks. Oh, not bricks, sticks. Mummy, sticks and bricks. Sounds the same, not the same. And then carried on reading. It was just like, this is a 2.5-year-old who just loves
Brilliant.
this story, and she's just articulating it.
Yes.
And that's what we should be engendering, isn't it? And getting right, rather than ticking boxes to say what level has someone got to. Great. And yes, of course, we need have some sort of attainment and progress that measure. But let's get children talking about words, any words.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Talking of books, you're leaving your lovely job and your 46 schools on the south coast and around to the east a bit, and you're going off to a desert island. What are you going to take with you by way of a book to fill the hours?
Do you know what? I know exactly what I'm going to take. And I'm going to take a comprehensive kind of collection of the poetry of John Donne.
Are
Um,
you?
yeah, I read, I don't know whether you read this, it's literally my standout read this year. I read Super Infinite, which is a biography of John Donne. It's just absolutely fabulous. Somebody recommended, a publisher recommended it to me. I was sat next to
Oh,
this
wow.
wonderful woman on a plane. Thank you very much, lady on EasyJet in the summer. And she said, read this, and it was just superb. And John Donne, I mean, wow, I could take that forever.
Oh, how
I mean, it could
lovely.
keep me going forever. I'm very passionate about poetry, but I think probably that would be the thing that would fill me up. I'm assuming I get Shakespeare anyway, so
You
there
absolutely
we are.
do. And I just assume that you would hide that somewhere in your backpack or wherever, because that wouldn't be a secondary English teacher who hasn't got Shakespeare about their person, wouldn't be normal, would it?
No.
Well, do you know what? This has been so lovely, so easy to talk to you, and so lovely to hear what you do and who you are, and what TCAT are also hoping to do, because clearly you're articulating that through everything you've shared with us this afternoon. So thank you very much. Is there anything that you'd like to say that I haven't asked you, or that you thought, oh, I'd just like to mention that? Here's your moment, Kay.
No, no, not really. I would just like to thank you, Margaret, and I'd like to thank Renaissance, because it's because of the work that we do with you that we're really able to make all these different connections. Work with Renaissance is such a great partnership, because it just leads to all these different kinds of avenues, and just promotes such rich discussion. Yeah, I just want to say thank you very much to all of you, to everyone in the team.
Thank you very much, Kay. You're very welcome. And as always, it's a pleasure talking to you. And I hope to see you very soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Kay. Maybe all schools need a K around them. If you've enjoyed this episode of the Renaissance Space podcast, please take a moment to rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget that you can catch up on all previous episodes at www.renlearn.co.uk/podcast. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode of the Renaissance Space podcast, please check out the Education Joining the Dots podcast from our colleagues at GL Assessment. Thank you.